All right, let's dive into the art world today, huh? We're going deep with a Houston artist, Bob Camblin, and one of his most interesting paintings, Skull with X.
Oh, Skull with X. Yeah, I like that one.
So, to help us unpack it all, we've got a biography of Camblin himself, a YouTube video breaking down the painting, and a book that features Skull with X. We're going to look at Camblin's life, the symbolism he used, and where it all fits in art history.
Sounds like a plan. It's amazing how much you can learn from just one painting, though, right?
Totally. It's like a window into the artist's mind. Let's start with Bob Camblin, the man. The biography paints him as quite a figure in the Houston art scene. Very interesting guy.
It goes beyond just talented, though. He really lived for his art, striving for pure expression, not just in his paintings, but in like his whole life. He even called himself a distillation of art.
Wow, a distillation of art. That's pretty profound. Almost like he wanted to boil everything down to its essence, right? Cut out all the fluff. But how does that connect to this painting, Skull with X?
Okay, well, picture this. You're standing right there in front of Skull with X. First thing you see is this human skull, but it's not like a photograph. Camblin uses these earthy tones, browns, greens with some gray. So it's got this weathered look, like it's seen a lot of time.
Ah, okay. I see. And the background isn't just a plain white canvas, is it?
Nope, not at all. It's hazy, almost dreamy, with these washes of pinks and purples,
Like
grays.
a fog rolling in almost.
Yeah, exactly. And then right in the middle of all that muted color, bam,
Yeah.
this shockingly bright red X right below the skull.
It's got to be jarring to see. So simple, but it definitely grabs your attention, makes you wonder, what's the meaning here? And that's where we get to the symbolism, right?
You got it. It's like a puzzle with, well, a lot of pieces. Starting with the skull itself, probably the most obvious symbol there. Everyone knows skulls represent mortality, the fragility of life.
Right. It reminds us we're all going to end up as a skull someday. Dust to dust, all that.
Exactly. But Camblin takes it a step further. He's tapping into this idea of impermanence. You see it in Zen Buddhism. It's called anitya. Think of it like waves on the shore, always changing, never the same.
So the skull isn't just about death then, it's about this constant change.
Yeah, that's it. It's the cycle of things. The YouTube video even brings up the I Ching, an ancient Chinese text. And there's this one section called splitting apart. It talks about how decay can actually lead to transformation.
Huh, I never thought about it like that. Like a seed splitting open so new life can grow.
Exactly. So even though the skull seems simple at first, there's layers to it. The end, but also change, and maybe even a new beginning.
Okay, I'm starting to see it. The skull has all these different meanings, but what about that big red X? What do you think Camlin's trying to tell us with that?
Well, let me put it this way. The skull is the what, the fact that death is going to happen. The X is more about the how. The book gives a few different interpretations of that red X. Could be a crossroads, maybe a warning, or even like humanity trying to control these transitions.
I mean, yeah, we do that, right? We try to make sense of things, especially the big unknowns like death.
Yeah, and the YouTube video adds to it, says the X could be a challenge, like an invitation to really live your life on purpose, intentionally. To really ask yourself, what am I doing with this time that I have?
Wow, that gets deep pretty fast.
Yeah, it does. But that's kind of the point of art, right? It pushes us to think about these things.
True enough. Now, the book mentions that this painting, Skull with X, connects to a whole art tradition called Vanitas. What's that all about?
Ah, yes, Vanitas. Huge back in the 16th and 17th centuries, especially in Dutch and Flemish art. They were basically visual reminders that life is short. You'd see skulls, wilting flowers, hourglasses, things like that.
So are you saying Skull with X is like a modern take on a Vanitas painting? But it looks so different?
That's where Camblin's style comes in. He takes these old ideas and makes them his own. It's pretty cool.
So he's not just copying, he's creating something new.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to his whole distillation thing, boiling it down to the essentials.
It's not just technique then, it's a whole way of thinking about art.
You got it. And that's how we can really understand what Skull with X is all about.
It's like
Yeah.
he's, I don't know, translating these old artistic languages into his own style.
Yeah, and it's not just about the techniques either. It's about those big themes, life and death, searching for meaning. Artists have been thinking about that stuff for centuries.
And that's what I find so interesting about Skull with X. It's not just like a pretty picture. It makes you think about those big questions.
Right. It's like Camblin saying, look, we're all going to face this eventually, so how are you going to live your life knowing that?
So it's both a reminder that we're mortal and a challenge to be well, authentic, just like Camblin always trying to find that purity in his art and his life.
Exactly. And that philosophy of distillation, it's key to understanding his work, I think. He's not just
Right.
trying to make something beautiful. He wants to get at the core of what it means to be human.
Okay, but how does that distillation idea actually show up in this painting? Can you give me like a specific example?
Sure. Think about the skull itself. He could have painted it super realistically with all the little details, but he doesn't. Instead, he focuses on the shape, the structure. It's like he's saying, this is what's left when everything else is gone.
So even the way he paints the skull is about stripping things down. It's not about the details, it's about, I don't know, a deeper truth.
Right. And that connects back to Anipia, that concept of impermanence we were talking about from Zen Buddhism. Everything's always changing. The only constant is change.
And by not showing all those details, he's forcing us to see that impermanence, right? How fleeting life is. There's no escaping it.
It's like he's saying, this is what we all are underneath it all, underneath all the illusions.
Wow. You know, when I first heard we were going to do a deep dive on a painting with a skull, I was like, that's a bit morbid. But this is actually turning out to be pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah, and it's not just about death, really. It's about life,
Yeah.
about appreciating each moment, knowing that, well, it won't last forever.
It's like that old saying, life is a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. Skull with X reminds us to really pay attention to that journey, to savor it, to make the most of the time we have.
So it's not just a, what do they call it, a memento mori, a reminder of death. It's also like a call to action, to live fully and honestly.
And that brings us back to the X, right? That's not just some random mark. It's about choice, about being intentional. It's about deciding how you want to live your life, even though you know what's coming eventually.
So the skull is the fact that we all die, and the X is about, like, our power to choose our own path.
That's a great way to put it. It's interesting how Camblin uses color to show that difference, too. The skull is in these muted, earthy colors, and then the X is this bright, almost shocking red. It's like a burst of energy, life.
Like he's saying, yeah, death is part of life, but so is choice, so is action. Don't let one overshadow the other.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes Skull with X so interesting, I think. It's not just about death, it's about celebrating life, about living with purpose.
You know, when we were talking about those Vanitas paintings earlier, I was thinking how they can be a little, well, preachy, like they're trying to scare you into being a good person. But this one doesn't feel like that at all.
No, you're right. It's not about guilt or fear. It's about accepting the whole experience, the good and the bad.
And it does all that without being too obvious or heavy-handed with the symbols. It's subtle, but powerful.
That's Camblin for you. He's so good at getting these complex ideas across in a way that makes you think. He's not giving you all the answers. He's asking you to join the conversation.
I like that. It's not passive. It's like you're really engaging with the art and with these big questions.
And that engagement can really change you when you let yourself think about these things. It can change how you see the world and yourself.
It's like that quote, I think it's Proust, who said, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes."
Perfect. That's exactly what Skull with X does. It helps you see things in a new way. It challenges what you thought you knew and makes you reconsider what really matters.
Speaking of seeing things in a new way, can you tell me more about where Skull with X fits into art history? We talked about Vanita's paintings and artists like Turner and Wyeth and Klein, but how does this one painting fit into the bigger picture?
Well, it's interesting to think about how skulls have been used in art throughout history. It's this recurring image, a symbol that goes beyond cultures and time periods.
So it's not just a Western thing.
Oh, no, not at all. You see skulls in ancient Egyptian tombs, Mexican Day of the Dead, all sorts of places. They represent death, of course, but also rebirth, transformation, that life is a cycle.
So Camblin is using this universal symbol, but he's also doing something new with it, right?
Exactly. He's taking what came before and making it relevant for today.
And by adding that X, he's giving this ancient symbol a whole new layer of meaning.
He's bringing it into the now, making us think not just about death, but about the choices we make because of it.
It's like he's taking this old conversation about life and death and giving it a fresh perspective.
That's art for you. It's always changing, always finding new ways to talk about the human experience.
Now, I'm also curious about where this fits into Camblin's own development as an artist. The book mentioned he called himself a distillation of art. Was he always working with these kinds of themes?
Well, the biography makes it seem like Skull with X was a turning point for him. Early on, he was trying different things, finding his voice. But with this painting, it's like he really found it.
So it's not just one painting, it's like the culmination of everything he'd been working towards.
Exactly. And you can see that in how he blends all those influences. Turner, Wyeth, Klein. It's like he took everything he learned and made something completely new, uniquely his.
It's like he's distilling not just techniques, but his own life experiences too.
And that's why it's so powerful, I think. It's not just intellectual, it's personal.
It's like he's putting his whole heart and soul into it. We could see that.
And when we see it, we're kind of invited to do the same, to go on our own journey of self-discovery, to think about our own fears and hopes, to really embrace life.
It's amazing how much we've gotten out of just one painting.
You know, right? It shows how much can be packed into a single piece of art.
It's like they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but this is more like, I don't know, 1,000,000 words.
Yeah. And the best part is that Skull with X doesn't give you easy answers. It leaves you with more questions, which is a good thing.
So it's not about figuring out the right answer. It's about how you connect with it personally, what it means to you.
Exactly. That's the power of art. It starts these conversations, these thoughts that can really change you.
It's not just looking, it's like experiencing it, letting it, wash over you.
And in a world that's so focused on the outside, on distractions, a painting like Skull with X can wake you up. It's a reminder to slow down, look inside, and ask yourself what really matters.
Like Camlin is saying, hey, this life is precious and it doesn't last forever. What are you going to do with it?
And that's a good message for all of us, I think.
Okay, so as we keep looking at Skull with X, what are some things we should keep in mind? What are the main takeaways to help us understand it better?
Well, one thing is, remember, it's not just about death. It's about life. It's about the choices you make, the people you connect with, what you leave behind.
It's about living on purpose, being present, and finding meaning even when things feel crazy.
Right. It's also about remembering that even though, we're all going to die someday, how you live matters. You have the power to make your own meaning.
And Skull with X is like giving us the power to do that. It reminds us that even though death is out there, we still have choices. We can create something beautiful.
And that's something worth fighting for. So as we keep going, let's keep those ideas in mind. We'll look at the symbols, the techniques, and how it all fits together.
Sounds good. I'm excited to see what else we find out about this really fascinating painting. It's amazing how Camlin can take something like a skull, which we've all seen a million times, and make it feel so, I don't know, personal and meaningful.
Right. It's like he's tapping into something universal, but also making it specific to his own experience.
And that's part of what makes Skull with X so powerful, don't you think? It's like he's part of this whole lineage of artists who've been using the skull to explore these huge questions about life and death, for centuries.
Oh, absolutely. Think about those Vanitas paintings we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Those Dutch and Flemish artists, they were really onto something with that whole idea that life is fleeting.
Yeah, those were pretty intense. And Camlin definitely seems to be drawing from that tradition. But he's also like taking it a step further, I think. He's not just saying, hey, you're going to die someday. He's asking, okay, so what are you going to do about it?
Exactly. He's not just reminding us of our mortality. He's challenging us to really think about how we're living our lives, knowing that we don't have forever.
And that's where that big red X comes in, right?
Yeah.
It's like this symbol of choice, of agency. Like he's saying, don't just wait for the inevitable. You have a say in how this all plays out.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that idea of choice, of having agency, it feels especially relevant today.
Yeah.
In a world where it's so easy to feel like we're just being told what to think and how to feel.
Like Camlin is giving us permission to break free from all that and be ourselves.
I think you're right. And that emphasis on individuality, on finding your own voice, it's something you see in his artistic style too, right?
Yeah.
Like how we were talking about how he takes inspiration from Turner and Wyeth and Klein, but he still creates something totally unique.
Yeah, he's like this master chef taking all these different ingredients and blending them into something completely new.
A master of distillation. Remember that word. Stripping everything down to the bare essentials. That's what he's all about. And you see that in the painting's composition too. So simple, so minimal, but man, it really packs a punch.
Like he's saying, this is it. No distractions, no BS, just the truth, raw and unfiltered.
And in a world that's so full of noise and clutter, that kind of simplicity can be really powerful, even a little bit unsettling.
It definitely stops you in your tracks, makes you pay attention. You can't just glance at Skull with X and walk away. It makes you think.
It's a painting that unfolds over time. The more you look at it, the more questions it raises, the more you start to see.
So it's not just about the visual impact, it's about this whole journey it takes you on, intellectually, emotionally.
And that journey is different for everyone. Some people might look at Skull with X and think, wow, that's dark, that's morbid. And others might see it as hopeful, even life-affirming.
Like they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly. And I bet that's exactly what Camblin would have wanted. He wasn't trying to tell people what to think. He was giving them the space to come to their own conclusions, to bring their own experiences to the work.
So it's not just a painting, it's like a starting point for reflection, for self-discovery, for conversations about those big questions.
And those conversations can be really powerful, especially when you have them with other people. It's amazing how art can do that,
Hmm.
bring people together, even when you're talking about something as, well, as universal as death.
I'm curious about the legacy of Skull with X, though. Do you think it's still influencing artists today?
That's a tough one. It's hard to say for sure. But I do think that Camblin's focus on, stripping things back to the basics, exploring those big themes of mortality, and challenging us to live authentically. Yeah, I think that definitely resonates with a lot of contemporary artists.
Especially those who are trying to figure out what it means to be human in the 21st century. It's a lot
Oh,
to unpack, right?
totally. And that's one of the reasons why Skull with X feels so timeless. It speaks to something fundamental about the human condition, something that's always relevant no matter what time period you're in.
So even though it was painted decades ago, it still feels fresh, like it could have been made today.
Absolutely. And I bet it'll keep speaking to people for years to come. It's the kind of painting that stays with you, makes you keep thinking, makes you keep asking questions.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Skull with X, what's the one thing you really want listeners to take away from all of this?
Hmm. Well, I think the main thing to remember is that this painting is not just about death. It's about life. It's about being present, making choices, and finding meaning and purpose, even when the world feels chaotic.
It's a good reminder that even though our time is limited, there's still so much we can do with it.
And if you're ever feeling lost or unsure, or just need a reminder of what really matters, I would say go back and look at Skull with X again. Let it challenge you. Let it inspire you to live a life that's true to yourself.
I think that's a great place to leave it. So, to all our listeners, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Bob Camblin and his incredible painting, Skull with X. Hopefully, this has made you curious to see more of his work and maybe even explore the art world a little more yourself. And hey, keep those conversations going, keep thinking, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep creating.